In a mansion of secrets and grief, a tech mogul hires a nanny for his sick son. But what he discovers on the surveillance cameras will change everything. Get ready for a story about love, loss, and shocking truths. If you believe in finding light in the darkness, hit that like button and subscribe now. The Vance Manor stood imposingly against the Philadelphia sky, its vast windows reflecting the setting autumn sun. Adrian Vance watched the city from his executive office, a cup of coffee untouched on the mahogany table. His intense brown eyes were fixed on a distant point, while his mind wandered through the empty, echoing corridors of his own life, lost in the shadow of a grief he couldn't escape. The soft sound of the door opening brought him back to the cold reality of his present. Eleanor, his assistant for 15 years, entered with a black folder in her hands. "Mr. Vance, the applications for the caregivers you requested." Her voice was professional, as always, but Adrian detected a subtle note of concern. Eleanor had been with him through everything. She knew the situation with his son, Thomas, far too well to maintain total neutrality. "How many this time?" he asked, turning his chair to face her, his voice weary. 15. All with outstanding qualifications and experience with children who need complex care, she replied, handing him the folder. Adrian took it, quickly flipping through the documents, each candidate looking perfect on paper, their professional portraits carefully curated. But he knew better than anyone how appearances could be deceiving. He had trusted before, and it had cost him everything. "Schedule interviews with the top 3 for tomorrow." "Sir." Eleanor hesitated, her brow furrowed. Dr. Bennett called again. "He insists that Thomas needs stability. Changing caregivers every month and a half isn't helping. I pay Dr. Bennett to look after my son's health, Eleanor, not to give me advice on how to run my household." Adrian cut in, his voice as icy as the wind outside, the familiar wall slamming into place. Eleanor nodded, recognizing the cue to leave, her expression resigned. Before she left, however, she paused at the door, her hand on the handle. "Thomas asked if you'd have hot chocolate with him tonight." A muscle tensed in Adrian's jaw. The familiar guilt. "I have a video conference with investors in Shanghai. Tell him that." He paused, the image of his son's always disappointed expression, his bright blue eyes dimming with another apology, flashing in his mind. "Cancel the conference. I'll be there soon." Alone again, Adrian opened the top drawer of his desk and took out a photograph. Sophia was smiling in the picture, her bright blue eyes shining with the same contagious sparkle that Thomas had inherited. For years had passed since the accident, since he'd lost her, but the pain remained as vivid, as raw, as on the first day. He still blamed himself. Downstairs, he could hear Thomas's characteristic cough, followed by the gentle, soothing voice of Mrs. Gable, the temporary caregiver. She was the 10th this year. Adrian knew, logically, that he needed to find someone permanent, someone Thomas could bond with, but the idea of entrusting the care of his son, his most precious treasure, to a stranger terrified him. Felt like a risk he couldn't afford to take. Walking down the grand marble stairs, he found Thomas in the sunroom, wrapped in his favorite throw, reading a book about stars, his quiet world filled with the vastness of the cosmos. When he saw him, the boy smiled, a wide, contagious smile that lit up the room, and Adrian felt the familiar ache in his chest, a bittersweet reminder of the woman he had lost. Thomas was the spitting image of Sophia, from his bright eyes to the freckles that dotted his nose, to that smile that could melt ice. "Dad, are you having hot chocolate with me tonight?" "Of course, son," Adrian said, forcing a smile, his heart heavy with the guilt of almost canceling. "How about we order that fancy hot chocolate you like?" Thomas's eyes lit up, but then a painful cough shook him, his small body trembling. Mrs. Gable approached quickly with the nebulizer, and Adrian watched, rooted to the spot, feeling utterly powerless as his son struggled to breathe, his small battle for air echoing in the quiet room. Moments like this reminded him of how much was at stake, how fragile life was, how much he needed to protect the only person who still mattered in his world. Later, after putting Thomas to bed, reading him a story about a brave little astronaut exploring distant galaxies. Adrian sat in his private office, the room dark except for the glow of the monitors that showed every corner of the estate. It was his daily habit, his nightly ritual, checking the surveillance system, ensuring everything was in order, that his son was safe, protected within the walls he had built around them both. Tomorrow he would review the applications, interview the candidates, and one of them would be chosen to be part of this closely monitored world he had constructed, a world designed to keep risks and emotions at bay. Among the applications, one name caught his eye: Clara Davies. Her qualifications were outstanding, her experience with children with complex needs extensive, her references impeccable. But it was something about her profile photo that stopped him, that challenged his assumptions. A sense of quiet strength radiated from her eyes, unlike the carefully professional portraits of the other applicants. It sparked a curiosity he rarely indulged. A notification popped up on his screen, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from his lawyer, David. Employment agreement for Ms. Davies sent. Do you want the standard non-disclosure agreements included? All of them? Adrian paused, looking at Sophia's photo on his desk. And add one about the extensive surveillance. David's reply notification popped up instantly. Adrian, you know that can deter many excellent applicants, don't you? Most find that level of surveillance unacceptable. Adrian looked at Sophia's photo again, her smiling face a painful memory. Sophia always said trust your instincts. He typed his reply. Anyone who has nothing to hide won't have a problem with surveillance. David. Include all agreements. Hanging up, he turned his attention back to Clara Davies's application. Tomorrow he would meet her in person, and something told him that this encounter would be unlike the others. Whether it was her exceptional qualifications, her profound sense of empathy that seemed to radiate from her profile, or the quiet strength in her eyes, there was something about her that challenged his assumptions, that piqued a dormant curiosity. And Adrian Vance wasn't used to being curious about anyone. He was used to being in control. The Vance Enterprises meeting room, high above the city, was silent when Clara Davies entered. The warm natural light filtering through the large windows contrasted sharply with the minimalist design and austere atmosphere of the room. Dressed in simple, professional attire, she maintained a serene posture, although her heart was hammering against her ribs, her nerves present despite her calm exterior. Adrian Vance watched her from the other side of the vast glass table, analyzing every detail, his gaze assessing, searching. His eyes, trained by years of assessing people, noticed her capable hands, clasped loosely in her lap, the way she maintained steady eye contact without wavering, without showing intimidation, and above all, the quiet confidence that emanated from her presence, a sense of calm that filled the room. Ms. Davies, he began, his voice controlled, measured. Your qualifications are outstanding. Several years caring for children with complex needs, advanced training in pediatric care, excellent letters of recommendation. Almost too perfect. Clara smiled slightly, a genuine, quiet smile that touched her eyes. Mr. Vance, I learned early on that perfection is a facade. What I offer is not perfection, but unwavering dedication and transparency. The directness of her answer took him by surprise. Normally, the candidates would offer rehearsed assurances of competence and glowing self-praise. Tell me about your last experience, he asked, leaning back in his chair, intrigued. I looked after young Thomas for 3 years, she replied, her voice soft, a hint of sadness in her eyes. He had a chronic respiratory condition. They were challenging, but incredibly fulfilling years. Unfortunately, she paused, and Adrian noticed a glint of deep, unspoken emotion in her eyes. Thomas passed away a few months ago. That's when I decided I needed some time to process the loss, to grieve. And what makes you think you're ready to take on another complex case? Adrian asked, his voice guarded, probing. To care for another child with significant health issues? So soon after. Because grief taught me compassion, Mr. Vance, not fear, Clara replied, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering. Loss taught me empathy, taught me the fragility of life, and the importance of cherishing every moment. Your son, Thomas. He deserves someone who understands that caring goes beyond administering medication and following protocols. It's about connecting. It's about living. Adrian leaned back further in his chair, studying her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city skyline, the wall going up subtly. Ms. Davies, I need to be clear. This position requires more than just professional competence. There is an extensive surveillance system throughout the estate. Your privacy will be limited. Your movements will be monitored. Many find that level of surveillance unacceptable. I understand your need to protect your son, Mr. Vance, Clara replied, her voice calm, her gaze steady, challenging his methods without being disrespectful. If I were in your position, I would likely prioritize safety above all else. But I hope that, in time, you'll realize that trust is earned through relationship, through open communication, not demanded through observation. Trust is built through actions, not surveillance. He turned, staring at her with intensity, the muscle in his jaw ticking. Are you questioning me, Ms. Davies? No, sir, she replied softly, her voice clear, unafraid. I'm being transparent, as I promised at the beginning of this conversation. I'm being honest. A heavy silence filled the room, thick with unspoken challenge and unexpected honesty. Eleanor, who was watching the interaction from just outside the doorway, held her breath, her eyes wide. In 15 years, she had never seen someone so subtly, yet so directly, challenge her boss, the formidable Adrian Vance. Would you like to meet Thomas? Adrian's question surprised even him, the offer completely unplanned. On Thomas's floor of the manor, Thomas was finishing his breathing exercises in the sunroom. His face slightly flushed but his bright blue eyes shining, when they entered. His eyes lit up at the sight of his father, a wide, contagious smile spreading across his face. But it was Clara who held his gaze, her presence drawing him in. You must be Thomas, she said, approaching him with a warm, gentle smile, crouching slightly to be closer to his level. I hear you love books about stars. The boy's face broke into an even wider smile, his eyes sparkling. You like them too? Yes, I do, Clara replied, her voice soft, engaging. I used to volunteer at an observatory. Did you know that some stars tell stories just by the light they give off? Thomas giggled, a sound that made Adrian pause in the doorway, his heart aching with a bittersweet pain. He hadn't heard that sound, that genuine, unrestrained giggling, in ages. For the next hour, while Mrs. Gable quietly excused herself, Clara talked to Thomas about distant galaxies, about nebulae, about her time volunteering at the observatory, about the stories hidden in the constellations. Adrian watched from the doorway, unseen by both of them, observing the natural ease Clara had with his son, the way she managed to entertain him while gently incorporating breathing techniques into their play, unobtrusively checking his pulse, his color, his readings, without Thomas even realizing he was being cared for in a medical sense. Dad! Thomas called out when Clara left the sunroom for a moment to get some water. She's different from the others. Adrian nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face, watching Clara's retreating figure. Yes, son. She is. Later, back in his office, Adrian was reviewing the employment agreement. Eleanor came in quietly. Mr. Vance, the other applications are still pending. Cancel all remaining interviews, Eleanor, he replied, without taking his eyes off the document, the name Clara Davies standing out. Ms. Davies starts tomorrow morning. Eleanor paused, surprised. You're sure, sir? She was very direct during the interview. She didn't shy away from your questions about the system or about Thomas's condition. Adrian looked up, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Precisely why, Eleanor? Thomas needs someone who sees him, not just his illness. Someone who isn't afraid to tell the truth, to be transparent, even if it means challenging me occasionally. That evening, while reviewing the surveillance footage from the day, his usual habit, Adrian stopped at the image of Clara reading to Thomas before bed. His son was snuggled up against her, smiling, his eyes shining, as she made different voices for each character in the story about a brave little stargazer. "What should I do, Sophia?" he murmured to the framed photo of his late wife on his desk. The silence that followed, the stillness of the monitored room, seemed fraught with possibilities and unspoken fears. An undeniable truth had entered their lives, and the mystery of how to integrate it, how to lower the walls, weighed heavily on him. He looked at Clara and Thomas, seeing a connection he hadn't known was possible. Sophia always said, "Trust your instincts." Closing the monitoring system, Adrian allowed himself a moment of fragile hope. Maybe, just maybe, he had found someone who could bring light not only into Thomas's life, but into the whole manor that had lived in the shadows for so long. The next morning brought with it a crisp autumn sun filtering through the manor windows, the air outside carrying the scent of fallen leaves. Clara arrived punctually at 7, carrying a simple bag and a small wrapped gift. Eleanor greeted her in the entrance, her footsteps quiet on the large rug in the foyer. "Mr. Vance has calls this morning, but he left detailed instructions about Thomas's routine," Eleanor explained, guiding her towards the stairs. "The protocols, schedules, and emergency contacts are in his room." In the hallway on Thomas's floor, they stopped outside his door, decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars. Eleanor paused before opening it. "Ms. Davies, Thomas had a restless night. The cold weather tends to affect his breathing." Clara nodded slowly, her expression one of quiet understanding. "Could I see the night's logs? It might help to understand his breathing pattern." Inside the room, Thomas slept fitfully, the medical monitor beside his bed emitting a soft, steady beep. Clara approached quietly, watching the readings with experienced, knowledgeable eyes. "Good morning, little stargazer," she whispered as Thomas began to wake up, his bright eyes opening slowly. A faint smile appeared on his pale face. "You came." His voice was soft, raspy. "Of course I did, Thomas," Clara replied, her voice gentle. "And I brought something special for you." She handed him the small wrapped gift. Thomas carefully unwrapped it, revealing a miniature galaxy projector. "Wow!" His eyes lit up, wide with wonder. "It's like having the universe in my room." "I thought we could create our own galaxy here," Clara said, smiling. "But first, how about some warm hot chocolate to help you feel better?" Across the manor, in his office, Adrian watched the interaction through the surveillance feed. Something about the natural ease Clara had, the way she managed to engage Thomas, to make him smile, to talk about stars and galaxies while discreetly checking his vitals, captivated him. It wasn't just professional, it was genuine. Throughout the morning, Clara established a calm, gentle routine. She turned the breathing exercises into imaginative adventures, told stories during his nebulizer treatments, and managed to get Thomas to take all his medication without a single protest. During a quiet moment, Adrian decided to make a surprise appearance. He found Thomas in the sunroom, sitting at a small table, eating a vibrant, colorful soup that wasn't part of his usual, limited menu. "What is this soup, Thomas?" he asked, raising an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his voice. "It's my special recipe," replied Clara, unfazed, entering the sunroom with a tray. "It's packed with good things, Mr. Vance, and it fits all of Thomas's restrictions. The secrets, the fresh ingredients." Thomas raised his spoon excitedly, his eyes sparkling. "Dad, try it. It's amazing. It doesn't taste like medicine." Adrian hesitated for a moment, then accepted the spoonful his son offered. The taste surprised him. It really was delicious. "Ms. Davies," he said, looking at Clara, a new appreciation in his eyes. "Office. Now." In his office, Adrian closed the door, the sound echoing slightly. "Ms. Davies, I appreciate your initiative, but any changes to Thomas's diet require my prior approval." "With all due respect, Mr. Vance," Clara replied calmly, standing before his desk, her posture serene. "The soup follows all dietary restrictions. I have the complete composition here." She handed him a detailed sheet, outlining the ingredients and nutritional information. Adrian studied the document, searching for flaws, finding none. There's something else I need to discuss, she continued, her voice softer, but firm. Thomas mentioned that he would like to see the gardens. Get some fresh air. Son, fresh air. It's beneficial for him. Absolutely not, Ms. Davies. Adrian's voice was sharp, the wall going up instantly. The outside air can strengthen his immune system under controlled conditions, interrupted Clara, her voice gentle but unwavering. Isolating him completely from the world won't protect him forever, Mr. Vance. It will only make him more vulnerable. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with unspoken tension. Adrian struggled internally, the battle between his ingrained need for control, his fear, and the undeniable logic of her words raging within him. 1 week, he finally said, conceding, his voice rough. Give me positive results in a week, stable readings, no ill effects, and I'll consider your suggestions about outdoor activities. Brief ones. That evening, after Thomas had fallen asleep, Clara was organizing her notes when she came across a drawing he had made earlier that day. 3 stick figures, 1 tall, 1 small, and 1 medium-sized, all smiling under a starry sky. Adrian, who had spent the day alternating between high-stakes meetings and reviewing the surveillance feed, found the drawing on his desk the next morning, with a note attached. Mr. Vance, it read in neat script. Thomas has a heart bigger than his room and dreams bigger than his limitations. He drew this today, talking about how nice it would be to watch the stars for real one day. Sometimes, Mr. Vance, the greatest acts of protection involve allowing small, calculated risks. Respectfully, Clara Davies. Sitting back in his chair, Adrian looked longingly at the drawing, at the 3 smiling figures, at the single figure in the sky. Sophia's words echoed in his mind. A painful, beautiful memory. Love without freedom is a gilded cage, my love. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to wonder if his relentless, protective methods weren't actually stifling Thomas's chances of living fully, of experiencing joy, of simply being. On the surveillance screen, he watched Clara adjusting the galaxy projector, creating a private universe on the ceiling of Thomas's room. Thomas giggled, pointing at the constellations, his eyes shining with a joy Adrian hadn't seen for a long time. Perhaps, Adrian thought, the walls he had built weren't protecting Thomas at all. Perhaps it was time he learned to loosen the reins a little, to trust someone, to trust the possibility of light entering their shadowed world. Clara's few weeks at Vance Manor passed quickly, bringing subtle but significant changes to the once somber household. The most noticeable was Thomas's frequent, genuine smile, which now echoed through the previously silent corridors, a sound that was music to Adrian's ears. Adrian, watching through the surveillance system, noticed how his son seemed stronger, more lively, despite the limitations of his condition. He was engaging with the world, asking questions, dreaming of stars. One particularly clear morning, Adrian canceled an important meeting when he saw on the monitor that Thomas was having a respiratory crisis, a sudden, alarming difficulty breathing. He rushed to his son's room, his heart pounding with a familiar terror, only to find Clara already calmly, expertly controlling the situation with a competence that left him speechless, a quiet force of nature in the room. Breathe with me, little stargazer, she said softly, sitting behind Thomas on the bed, guiding his breathing with gentle hands on his chest. Remember our story about the astronaut? Let's go up to the surface very slowly. Thomas, leaning back against her, followed her breathing rhythm, his small hands squeezing her arms tightly, trusting her completely. Adrian stood in the doorway, invisible to both of them, observing the profound intimacy of that moment, the quiet strength of the bond that had formed between his son and this remarkable woman. All right, Clara continued, her voice calm, soothing. Now tell me 3 things you can see. The galaxy projector, Thomas breathed, calmer now, the panic subsiding. My star book. And Mom's picture. Adrian felt his heart squeeze, a wave of emotion washing over him. Sophia's picture was on the bedside table, her smiling face eternally watching over the son who looked so much like her. Great, Clara said, her voice warm. 2 things you can touch. My throw, Thomas whispered, his fingers clutching the soft fabric. And your necklace. Clara smiled, letting Thomas play with the small star-shaped pendant she always wore around her neck. Perfect. Something you can smell. The calming tea you make, Thomas murmured, his breathing now more regular. The crisis passed gradually, leaving Thomas exhausted but stable. As he finally fell asleep, his breathing soft and even, Clara tucked him into bed with a motherly care that both warmed and ached Adrian's heart. When she turned around, she was startled to see Adrian standing in the doorway, his face pale but his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and something else entirely. Ms. Davies, he said, his voice quiet, raw with emotion. I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. How long have you been using this technique with him? The anchoring technique. Since the first week, Mr. Vance? She replied softly, her gaze meeting his directly. It helps prevent panic during crises by focusing on the senses. It gives them something real to hold on to when they feel like they're losing control. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of vulnerability, of stress. Why wasn't I informed? Why wasn't this in the reports? It is in the daily log I send you, Mr. Vance, she replied softly, her voice gentle, not accusatory. Page 4. Paragraph 1 of last week's report. He remembered the document, one of the many he barely skimmed, too busy with deals and acquisitions. Guilt hit him like a physical blow. He had been so focused on monitoring, on control, that he had missed the most important details. Mr. Vance? Clara hesitated, her gaze shifting to his sleeping son, then back to him. Can I make a suggestion? He nodded, still watching his sleeping son, his mind reeling from the realization of how much he had missed. Thomas needs his father, Mr. Vance, she said, her voice gentle but firm, filled with unwavering conviction, stating a truth he had long denied. As much as he needs his medication, his treatments, your presence, your love, it has a therapeutic effect that no treatment can replace. It's the strongest anchor he has. I have a company to run, Ms. Davies? He defended himself, the old excuse automatic, but his voice lacked conviction, the words hollow. And you have a son to love, Mr. Vance? She replied firmly, challenging his priorities, stating the more important truth. Allow me to show you something, Clara said, opening a logbook she kept meticulously organized in Thomas's room. These are the records of Thomas's vital signs. Notice how the numbers improve significantly. Stabilize. When you are present. Yesterday, during the hot chocolate you shared, his saturation remained stable for hours. The entire time. Adrian examined the charts, his analytical gaze, trained by years of recognizing patterns in data, instantly recognizing the truth she was pointing out. His presence wasn't just comforting. It was physically beneficial for his son. Why do you keep such detailed records, Ms. Davies? Because care isn't just about administering medication, Mr. Vance, she replied, her voice soft. It's about understanding every single aspect that affects his well-being. Physical, emotional, everything. That afternoon, Adrian canceled all his meetings. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to simply spend hours with Thomas, sitting in the sunroom, listening to him talk about his latest space discoveries, about the stories Clara told, about his dreams of one day seeing the stars for real, not just on the ceiling. Through the surveillance system monitors in his office, Clara discreetly watched the interaction between father and son, a soft smile on her lips, her heart full. Eleanor approached her in the monitor room, watching Adrian and Thomas together. First time I've seen him like this since Sophia left, the assistant commented softly. He's so afraid of losing Thomas that sometimes he forgets to just live it, to be in the moment. He is, Clara replied, watching them, a quiet understanding in her eyes. But love and protection don't have to be mutually exclusive, Eleanor. You can protect them by living with them, by cherishing the moments, not by hiding them away. How did you manage to convince him? Eleanor asked, a hint of awe in her voice. I didn't, Clara replied, smiling gently. I just showed him the truth. The truth in Thomas's readings. The truth in Thomas's eyes. That evening, after Thomas had finally fallen asleep, his breathing soft and regular, Adrian found Clara in the kitchen, preparing the calming tea that her son loved so much. "Ms. Davies," he said, his voice quiet. "Isabella," she corrected gently, using her first name for the first time, a subtle shift in their dynamic. "Clara," Adrian corrected himself, the name feeling right on his tongue. "Thank you. For today. For everything. Thomas. He hasn't been that calm, that happy, in so long." She smiled, that genuine warm smile that had intrigued him since the first interview, the smile that reached her eyes. "Thomas is an extraordinary boy, Mr. Vance. He doesn't just need to survive. He deserves to flourish." Adrian picked up a small, smooth stone from the counter, a fidget item Clara often used. "Sophia always said something like that," he murmured, looking at the stone, then at Clara. It was the first time he had mentioned his late wife voluntarily to anyone in years. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, but full of mutual understanding, a shared space of grief and dawning connection. The mystery of how to move forward was beginning to unveil itself. That evening, before going to sleep, Adrian did something he hadn't done in years. He accessed the surveillance system from his bedroom tablet and turned off the cameras in Thomas's room. Some things, he realized, needed to be felt with the heart, with presence, with trust, not monitored by screens, by fear. The end of autumn brought with it the most intense cold Philadelphia had seen that year, a biting wind and a sudden drop in temperature. And with it, a severe respiratory crisis in Thomas. The cold weather, the sudden shift, triggered one of the worst crises he had ever faced. Adrian and Clara spent a long night in Thomas's room, each dealing with the fear differently, Adrian battling panic, Clara maintaining the outward calm needed to administer medication, monitor vital signs, and guide Thomas's labored breathing. Adrian paced the room like a caged lion, alternating between frantic phone calls to specialists, his voice tight with fear, and moments of pure, gut-wrenching panic as he watched his son struggle. "His heart rate is too fast, Clara," he murmured, his voice tight, watching the monitor. "We need to calm him down." "I've already called the ambulance, Adrian," he replied, his face pale with worry, his voice strained. "No," she said firmly, her voice unwavering, even in the face of the crisis. "A trip to the hospital in this cold front will only worsen his condition, Adrian. It will expose him to more risks. Trust me, we can manage this here." Their gazes met through the dimness of the room, lit only by the soft, swirling glow of the galaxy projector on the ceiling, a fragile universe in the storm. Thomas coughed between them, his little battle for breath echoing painfully in the silent room. "Mr. Vance?" she called softly, her voice gentle but firm, cutting through his panic. "Adrian, I need you to sit here." "What? Sit on the bed?" he asked, confused, pacing. "Lean back against the pillows?" When he hesitated, she insisted, her voice gentle but absolute. "Please, Adrian. He needs you." Adrian obeyed, albeit reluctantly, his need to help his son overriding his own discomfort, his own fear. Clara then positioned Thomas between his father's arms, the boy's small back against Adrian's chest, his head resting against his shoulder. "Now," she said, her voice soft, guiding them. "Breathe with me, slowly and deeply. Thomas will feel your rhythm and try to follow naturally. He needs to feel your calm." For long, agonizing minutes, the three of them remained like this, a fragile, powerful unit, breathing in sync, a father, a son, and the woman who was guiding them both through the storm. Gradually, mercifully, Thomas's breathing stabilized, the ragged edges smoothing out, his small muscles relaxing against his father's chest. "Tell a story," he asked in a weak voice, his eyes heavy with sleep, but a flicker of hope in them. Adrian froze, his mind a blank. It was Sophia who always told the stories, her voice weaving magic. He didn't know how. I don't know any stories, Thomas." "It was a cold evening," began Clara, taking a seat on the edge of the bed, her voice soft, picking up where Adrian faltered. Much like this one, the sky was dark, and the wind was struggling against the old trees. No, Thomas interrupted, his voice stronger now, a hint of his usual spirit returning. I want Dad to tell the story. The panic in Adrian's eyes was palpable again. He couldn't do this. He couldn't be Sophia. Clara gently touched his hand, a brief but profound gesture of comfort and encouragement. You can do it, Adrian, her eyes seemed to say. It was a summer evening, he began hesitantly, his voice rough, finding a different story, a different memory. Years ago, when your mother and I met, under the stars, I thought she was crazy. She was dancing in the rain on the university campus. The story flowed naturally after that, long-held memories finding voice, a story he hadn't told anyone in years. Thomas listened, fascinated, his eyes heavy with sleep, but refusing to close them so as not to miss any detail of the mother he had lost, of the father he was just starting to know. She said that life was too short to wait for the sun. Adrian continued, his voice breaking slightly with emotion, that sometimes you just have to dance in the storm. A particularly loud clap of thunder made Thomas cringe, burrowing deeper into his father's arms. Clara immediately turned up the volume on the galaxy projector, transforming the room into an ocean of soft, swirling light, a universe of calm against the storm outside. Look, little stargazer, she whispered, her voice soothing. Even storms can be beautiful, when seen from the right place. Thomas finally fell asleep, his breathing now regular and peaceful, nestled safely between his father's arms. Adrian, however, remained motionless, holding his son, as if afraid that any movement might break the fragile peace, the connection they had just found. You can go and rest, Clara, he said softly, his voice thick with fatigue and gratitude, to the woman who had saved them both. I'll stay with him now. I know you can stay with him, Adrian, she replied, arranging the covers gently, her voice soft. But you don't have to be alone. The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of the rain against the windows and Thomas's soft, even breathing. Do you know what else Sophia told me that evening, Clara? Murmured Adrian after a long moment, his gaze fixed on the swirling stars on the ceiling. She said that some people are like stars. They don't drive away the darkness, but they help us navigate it. They help us find our way through the night. Clara felt the weight of those words, understanding what he was really saying, understanding the unexpected depth of his analogy, recognizing herself in his words. Mr. Vance, she began, her voice soft. Adrian, he corrected gently, his gaze meeting hers, his eyes filled with a dawning light that mirrored the stars above. After tonight, Clara, I think we can dispense with the formalities. She nodded slowly, a small smile on her lips, acknowledging the shift, the bridge they had just built across the chasm of formality and fear. Adrian, she said softly. Adrian, he repeated, his voice filled with a profound truth. Sometimes stars need guidance too. That's why they work in constellations, Clara, to help each other find their way. His gaze met hers with an intensity that made her heart leap, a silent question hanging in the air between them. The storm outside began to subside, the wind easing, but the one raging inside them, the storm of unspoken emotions and dawning possibilities, was only beginning to gain strength. The mystery of their connection, of their shared future, was just starting. Thomas stirred in his sleep, muttering something about stars and galaxies, completely unaware of the significant, life-altering moment unfolding around him. Eleanor found them like this the next morning, the crisp autumn sun filtering through the windows, painting the room in warm hues. Thomas was sleeping peacefully between them, Adrian and Clara sitting on opposite sides of the bed, united by their shared vigil, by the quiet intimacy of the night, and by something else that neither of them was quite ready to name. Coffee's ready, she announced softly, her voice gentle, noticing the dark circles under their eyes and the quiet, charged glances they exchanged. And the medical reports you requested arrived, Mr. Vance. Thank you, Eleanor, Adrian replied, his voice weary but soft, without taking his eyes off Clara, his hand resting near Thomas's. Please cancel my appointments for today. I'll stay at home. The assistant smiled discreetly as she left, a knowing look in her eyes. Some storms, she thought, bring more than destruction. They bring renewal. The end of winter began to show its first signs of retreat when the Vance Manor experienced its first major test since the night of the cold front. Thomas developed an infection that kept him hospitalized for 2 days, leaving Adrian and Clara on constant alert, their fragile peace disrupted by the familiar fear. At the hospital, their masks of composure, the carefully constructed walls they had begun to lower, were cracking under the strain. Adrian alternated between frantic calls to specialists, his voice tight with worry, and moments of anguished silence, watching the monitors, the ghost of past loss haunting him. Clara, her face pale with fatigue, kept a tireless vigil by Thomas's bedside, her expertise and calm presence a lifeline. You need to rest, Adrian, he insisted on the second night, finding her dozing in an uncomfortable position in the bedroom armchair, her head resting against the cold fabric. I'm fine, she replied, straightening up, her eyes fixed on Thomas. I'd rather stay here. Why, Clara? He asked, his voice gentle. She hesitated before answering, her gaze distant, filled with a familiar pain. Because that's how I lost William. Her voice was barely a whisper, the memory raw. One evening, I decided to go home and rest, just for a few hours. When I came back in the morning, it was too late. Adrian crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulling her into his arms, his embrace fierce, protective, understanding. It was the first public display of affection between them, a quiet embrace in the sterile hospital room. But at that moment, nothing else mattered apart from the mutual comfort they found in each other, the shared understanding of loss, of fear, of the terrifying fragility of life. He's not William, Clara, he whispered against her hair, his voice rough with emotion. And you're not alone this time. Thomas watched the scene through squinted eyes, a small smile on his pale lips, a faint glimmer of his usual spirit. You look like a couple from a movie, he murmured, his voice weak, but a hint of amusement in it. They both broke apart, startled, surprised to realize that he was awake, that he had seen them. How are you feeling, little stargazer? Asked Clara, quickly regaining her professional composure, though a faint blush touched her cheeks. Hungry. Yes, he replied, a weak smile. Can I have something besides that transparent stuff? He pointed to the 4 serum. Adrian laughed, the first genuine sound of joy in days, the tension easing slightly. I'll see what the doctors allow, son. When they were alone for a moment, Thomas looked seriously at Clara. His bright blue eyes, so like his mother's, filled with a wisdom that sometimes frightened her. You love my father, don't you? The direct question caught her completely off guard. Thomas, it's okay, he continued, completely unfazed by her surprise. Mom appeared in my dream yesterday. She said you have a heart as big as the ocean. She said you're good for us. Clara felt tears forming in her eyes, her heart swelling with love for this perceptive, kind boy. Your father and you are very special to me, Thomas. Very special. Then why do you still pretend you're just our caregiver? He asked, his voice small, but filled with a profound understanding that cut through all the adult complications. It's complicated, darling, Clara murmured, using the familiar adult excuse. No, it's not, he insisted, his voice stronger, frustrated. It's complicated trying to understand why some stars tell stories. Love is easy. You just have to let it happen. Before he could reply, Adrian returned with a doctor, his face breaking into a smile. The good news came in cascades. The infection was subsiding, the tests showed significant improvement, and Thomas could go home the next day. That evening, while Thomas slept soundly for the first time in days, Adrian met Clara in the hospital cafeteria, a quiet, sterile space that nonetheless felt charged with possibility. The doctors say your dedication was crucial, Clara, he commented, taking a seat next to her, his hand reaching for hers on the table. The way you kept up the breathing exercises, the charting, the monitoring, even during his high fever. You were incredible. I just did my job, Adrian, she replied softly, her gaze meeting his. No, he said, taking her hand, his thumb gently rubbing her skin. You did much more than that. You fought for him, like a mother would. The word, freighted with meaning, hung in the air between them. The mystery of their relationship, suspended between professional and personal, was coming to a head. Adrian, she began, her voice trembling slightly, sensing what was about to happen. Marry me, Clara. The request caught her completely unprepared, stunning her into silence. What? Marry me, he repeated, his voice low, urgent, his gaze unwavering. He slid out of his chair and knelt beside her right there in the hospital cafeteria, ignoring the curious glances of the few other occupants. Not because Thomas needs a mother, Clara, or because I feel lonely, or because it's expected, but because you turned our house into a home, because you brought light and laughter and life back into a place that was living in shadows, because you showed me that it's possible to love deeply, truly, twice in a lifetime, in different but equally powerful ways. But what about your fear, Adrian? She asked, her voice trembling, remembering his words about losing Sophia, about never letting anyone become so important again. Your fear of losing again? I'm still afraid, Clara, he admitted, his voice raw with honesty. I probably always will be. Losing Sophia, losing William, that kind of pain never truly goes away. He smiled faintly, a sad, understanding smile. But Sophia taught me to dance in the cold, remember? She taught me not to wait for the sun. And you, Clara, you showed me that some dances, some risks, some loves, are worth the fear, worth the pain. Clara looked down at her intertwined hands, at Adrian kneeling before her, tears streaming freely down her face, tears of pain, of relief, of overwhelming emotion. She thought of all the barriers she had built up after losing William, the promises she had made to herself about never loving someone she could lose. She thought of Thomas, of his innocent wisdom about love being easy. She thought of Sophia, blessing them in their dreams, guiding them towards this moment. Does Thomas know about this? She asked, her voice thick with tears. Adrian smiled, a wide, radiant smile that lit up his face. Actually, he was the one who chose the ring. He took a small velvet box out of his pocket, revealing a delicate sapphire ring surrounded by tiny diamond stars, the stones catching the hospital lights. He said it had to be blue, Adrian explained, his voice soft, filled with love, like the night sky, Clara, because that's where you feel at home, looking at the stars. And the stars are to remind us that we always have light, even on the darkest nights. How long have you been planning this? She whispered, her heart overflowing. Since that evening on the balcony, Clara, he admitted, his gaze holding hers, filled with a profound love. Since that first night we truly connected. But I wanted to wait for the perfect moment, the perfect time. He paused, his expression turning pensive. Although, after these last few days, seeing how fragile life is, seeing how quickly everything can change, I've realized that there is no perfect moment, Clara. There are only moments, and it's up to us to make them special, to make them count. Clara looked at the ring, sparkling in the harsh hospital light, at Adrian kneeling in front of her, his face etched with love and vulnerability, and thought of all the barriers she had built up after losing William, the promises she had made to herself about never allowing herself to love someone she could lose again. She thought of Thomas, of his innocent wisdom about love being easy. She thought of Sophia, blessing them in their dreams, guiding them towards this moment. Yes, she whispered, the word a tearful breath, her voice trembling, filled with absolute certainty. Yes, Adrian. Yes. Yes, he asked, his voice hopeful. Yes, she repeated, the tears streaming freely now, but these were tears of joy, of acceptance, of surrender. Yes, Adrian. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Adrian's smile lit up the entire cafeteria, a radiant beacon in the sterile room. When he slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, a few discreet claps of applause echoed around the room from the other occupants, who had clearly been watching the unexpected proposal unfold. I think we have an audience, she murmured, blushing, tears streaming down her face. Let them see, Clara, he replied, pulling her gently into a kiss, oblivious to their surroundings. Some stories, some loves, they deserve witnesses. The mystery of their future was sealed with a kiss. News of the engagement spread quickly through Philadelphia's high society, generating buzz and speculation. Eleanor was the first to notice the ring on Clara's finger when they returned from the hospital, and her knowing smile, her quiet, heartfelt congratulations, said that she had probably already suspected it would happen. Clara's transition from caregiver to Adrian Vance's official fiancé sparked gossip among the city's elite. The society papers tried to create sensationalist, often cruel, stories, but the dignity with which Adrian and Clara handled the situation, always putting Thomas's well-being and happiness first, soon silenced the meanest tongues, proving the depth of their commitment. One particularly significant morning, Adrian found Clara in Sophia's old bedroom, which had remained untouched, a silent memorial for years. Are you sure you want to do this today, Clara? He asked, watching her look at the photographs on the walls, at Sophia's smiling face in the sun. Thomas deserves to know more about his mother, Adrian, she replied gently, her hand resting lightly on a photo of Sophia smiling, pregnant, under the stars. And I need to get to know her too, to understand the woman who brought him into the world, to understand the woman you loved. Adrian hugged her from behind, wrapping his arms around her, both of them contemplating the ghost of the past in the quiet room. She would have liked you, Clara, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. How can you be sure, Adrian? Because you have the same sparkle in your eyes when you talk about making a difference in other people's lives, he said, pulling her closer. He paused, taking a deep breath, the scent of old perfume, of memory, in the air. Sophia always said that our purpose in life is simple, Clara. To leave the world a little better than we found it. You embody that. Just then, Thomas appeared in the doorway, hesitant, sensing the shift in the room, the quiet solemnity. May I come in? Of course, my love, Clara called, holding out her hand to him, drawing him into their space. The boy approached cautiously, his bright blue eyes, so similar to his mother's, taking in every detail of the room, the photographs, the quiet reverence. She liked to collect stars, explained Adrian, showing him a shelf full of different specimens, star fragments, small meteorites, pieces of rock that sparkled faintly. Each one had a story. Like this one. Thomas picked up a delicate star fragment, holding it carefully in his small hand. This one? Adrian smiled at the memory, a bittersweet expression. It was from the first time she felt you move, Thomas. We were under the stars, just like in your room, and she swore you were dancing inside her. To the sound of the wind, Clara watched the interaction between father and son, her heart overflowing with love and respect for the woman who had been so important in their lives, the woman who had brought them together in her own way. Can we keep some of her things? In my room? Asked Thomas shyly, looking from Adrian to Clara. Of course we can, Thomas, replied Adrian, pulling his son close. Actually, I was thinking of turning this room into something special. Place for Sophia. Like a memorial. Like what? Asked Thomas and Clara simultaneously, intrigued. A memorial, Adrian repeated, the idea taking shape, a way to honor the past while building the future. A place where we can come whenever we want to feel her presence, with photos, her stars, her favorite books. And we could add new things too, suggested Thomas, his eyes wide with excitement, already embracing the idea. Like photos of us, so she can see how happy we are now. Adrian felt tears well up in his eyes, the simple, profound wisdom of his son's suggestion overwhelming him. That's a perfect idea, son. That afternoon, the three of them worked together, reorganizing the room, transforming it not to erase Sophia's presence, but to celebrate her in a new way, to weave her memory into the fabric of their new family. Clara found a journal among Sophia's books and, with Adrian's permission, began to read it later. She wrote about you every day during her pregnancy, Adrian, she told him, her voice soft with wonder. She read a passage to Thomas. Look at this, my little stargazer. Today, my little sailor has decided that 3 a.m. is the perfect time to practice flying. Adrian says he'll be an astronaut, but I bet he'll be a galaxy explorer. Thomas laughed, the sound bright and clear. She was right. I love stars. While sorting through the photographs, they found a particularly touching one. Sophia dancing outside, her face lifted to the sky, radiant with happiness. This was on our wedding day, explained Adrian, smiling faintly. It started raining during the reception, and instead of getting upset, she just pulled everyone out to dance in the snow. Clara smiled, imagining the scene, a woman embracing joy even in unexpected circumstances. She really knew how to turn ordinary moments into extraordinary ones. Adrian. Like you, said Thomas, hugging her around the waist, surprising them both. At night, after Thomas had gone to sleep, Adrian found Clara on the balcony, gazing at the stars, her face illuminated by their soft light. What are you thinking about? About how love has many forms, Adrian, she replied, her voice quiet. About how it's possible to honor the past while building the future. He hugged her, feeling the engagement ring between their intertwined fingers, a symbol of their promise. Do you know what Sophia wrote in her last journal entry, Clara? Clara shook her head, waiting. True love is not possessive, Adrian read, his voice low. It is like the universe. It has infinite space to hold all the light, all the darkness, all the lives that pass through it. She was very wise, Clara whispered, tears in her eyes. Yes, Adrian agreed. She was, and I'd be happy to see us find our own galaxy, Clara. The mystery of how love expands, how new bonds honor old ones, was becoming clear. That evening, before going to sleep, Thomas asked to see the photo album once more. On the last page, he put the drawing he had made earlier, his new family, Adrian, Clara, and himself with Sophia's golden glow in the sky above them. Now it's complete, he said, satisfied, closing the album. Clara and Adrian exchanged an emotional look. Yes, it was complete. Not because they had replaced what had been lost, but because they had learned that love has the power to expand, to create new spaces without diminishing the old ones. And somewhere, Sophia smiled, pleased to see that her family had found not just comfort, but a new form of happiness, a new constellation guided by her light. The wedding day dawned with a special clarity, the first day of spring. The Vance Manor had been transformed into a setting that blended elegance and intimacy. The ceremony would take place in the winter garden, now filled with blooming white and blue flowers, creating an atmosphere reminiscent of an illuminated night sky. Clara was getting ready in her old bedroom, the room where she had first found the drawing, now converted into a temporary bridal suite. Eleanor was helping with the last details of the dress, a simple ivory model with delicate details that resembled soft light rippling across the cosmos. Something's missing, said Eleanor, adjusting the veil. Just then, Thomas entered the room, impeccable in his little tuxedo, carrying a small, old wooden box. Dad asked me to give you this, he said, holding out the package to Clara. Inside was a pearl necklace, luminous and beautiful, and a handwritten note. Dear Clara, Sophia wore these stars at our wedding. She said they were special because, like true love, they were formed through time, patience, and adversity. Today, they belong to you not to replace memories, but to create new ones. With love, Adrian. The tears threatened to ruin Clara's carefully done makeup. Eleanor quickly intervened with a handkerchief. Let me help you with the necklace, she offered, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. Thomas watched intently as Eleanor fastened the pearl necklace around Clara's neck. You look beautiful, Clara, he said, his voice filled with awe. You look like a stargazer. Clara knelt down to meet him, taking care with her dress. And you look like a real prince, my love. Can I tell you a secret? He whispered, leaning in close. I dreamt about Mom yesterday. Really? Clara's heart squeezed. And what did she say? That she's happy? Thomas said, his voice soft. Because now she sure will never be alone. He paused, looking up at Clara with his bright blue eyes so like his mother's. And she asked me to say thank you for looking after Dad's heart. The mystery of Sophia's continued presence in their lives, her blessing, was a source of comfort and wonder. In the winter garden, Adrian waited anxiously. The judge was already in place, and the few selected guests took their seats. Soft music began to play, not the traditional wedding march, but a cosmic melody reminiscent of star songs, weaving through the quiet garden. Thomas entered first, walking slowly, carefully, carrying the wedding rings on a small velvet cushion. Then, all breaths were taken away when Clara appeared in the doorway, radiant in her ivory dress, wearing Sophia's pearl necklace, a symbol of love carried through time. Adrian felt his heart stop for a moment when he saw the necklace around her neck. It was as if Sophia was there, not as a ghost of the past, but as a loving presence, blessing this union, guiding them forward. We are gathered today, the judge began, his voice warm and resonant, not only to celebrate a union, but to honor the journey that has brought these souls to this moment. A journey of loss, of resilience, of unexpected connection, and of love that has found its way home. During the vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Adrian, began Clara, her voice trembling slightly, her eyes filled with love and a profound understanding of their shared history. I promise not only to love you, but to honor the story that brought you to me. I promise to be a safe haven for you and Thomas. I promise to dance in the cold when life gets heavy, and I promise to keep alive the memory of the love that came before me, weaving it into the tapestry of our future. Adrian took a deep breath before beginning his vows, his voice rough with emotion. Clara, you taught me that the heart has an infinite capacity for love, that building walls isn't protection. Building connections is. I promise to honor every part of who you are, to celebrate your strength and kindness, and to create with you and Thomas a future full of stars and galaxies. I promise to always remember that some cold fronts, some storms, bring blessings in disguise, and that true love knows no limits of time or space. Thomas, in his moment to hand over the rings, surprised everyone with his own words, spoken clearly and sincerely. I promise to be the best son for both of you, and to keep all the love in my heart, that which is here, and that which protects us from above. During the reception, which took place in the main garden, a light snow began to fall, dusting the flowers and the guests. Instead of running inside for shelter, the bride and groom smiled at each other, a shared understanding passing between them. I think someone wants us to dance in the cold, said Adrian, holding out his hand to Clara. The band, transitioning from classical, started playing a soft version of a cosmic melody, and soon, many of the guests, embracing the unexpected moment, joined in, dancing in the gentle snow. Thomas twirled among the adults, his crystal-clear laughter mixing with the music, a sound of pure joy. Later, as the party began to wind down, the three of them met on the balcony overlooking the garden, watching the soft snow fall, a gentle, quiet moment together. An aurora borealis, a rare sight, had formed in the night sky, painting it with swirling colors. Look! Exclaimed Thomas, pointing to the sky, his blue eyes wide with wonder. 7 colors, like the 7 colors of love. 7 colors of love? Asked Clara, curious. Yes, Thomas said, completely serious. Red is Mom's love, which is still here. Orange is Dad's love for us. Yellow is my love for you. Green is nature's love. Blue is your love, Clara. He paused, his gaze shifting to the swirling lights. The indigo is the love that is coming. And violet, he smiled mysteriously, a knowing look in his eyes, is the love we don't know yet. Adrian and Clara exchanged emotional glances, a profound understanding passing between them. Somehow, this child, who had endured so much, had perfectly summed up the complexity and beauty of their feelings, of their blended family, of the future stretching before them. "You know what?" said Adrian, hugging them both close, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I finally understand what Sophia meant about dancing in the cold." "What?" asked Clara softly. "That sometimes we need to let life surprise us," Adrian replied, his gaze fixed on the swirling aurora. "That the best moments come when we least expect them. And that love, true love, it has so many ways of manifesting itself, so many forms." The mystery of love's boundless capacity was illuminated in the night sky. Night fell softly over the Vance Manor, now no longer a place of shadows and fears, of locked doors and hidden grief, but a home filled with light, with laughter, with different kinds of love coexisting harmoniously. In Sophia's memorial room, a gentle breeze swayed the curtains, making the star fragments hanging in the window tinkle like tiny bells, like a last blessing for the family who had learned that love, in all its forms, is eternal, boundless, and has the power to guide you home. What memories or unspoken feelings would you want to preserve for someone special? If you could write a letter to keep in Sophia's memorial room, what would you say? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story of love, loss, and healing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time, and remember, the greatest light often appears after the deepest darkness.